Madison Jacobs, welcome to Keys to Success.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for having me today.
I am well. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. I wanted to kind of start off with what is your current position?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question because I'm in kind of in flux right now. But currently, I'm actually spending the next month out of an entire 10-week fellowship that I've been involved in through the Aspen Institute. I'm a fellow at the Aspen Tech Policy Hub, and what that means is I am a technologist that's come into this fellowship to work on policy issues in the technology space. So essentially that's branded as technology policy, but I'm working on learning about the policymaking process and how that relates to technology, and how we should bring more technologists into the policymaking process. The project that I'm working on for the Aspen Tech Policy Hub is around mitigating racial bias in education technologies. And essentially what that means is there's a lot of education technologies that are starting to pop up in schools all over the US. Many of those technologies are leveraging artificial intelligence and or machine learning. And the way that machines learn is based on the data that's fed into them. And so because, traditionally the education system has been biased towards Black and Brown students, a lot of the data that lives in the education system is sort of already encoded with bias. And so as we start to take that data and plug it into systems that are processing it, computers per se, we just perpetuate that already existing bias. And so here at the Hub, I'm working on technological and advocacy solutions and also policy levers on how we can better regulate this space and help to create more equitable outcomes for Black and Brown students in K through 12 schools in America.
Wow.
So that's my current thing that I'm doing now.
Right.
But I'm actually on leave from Google, where I operate as an editor-in-chief of Google for Startups, which is a team at Google who is tasked with sort of leveling the playing field for startup founders across the world. My purview specifically, and a lot of the programs that I work on at Google, in addition to helping us market the way that Google the way that Google helps startups in the ecosystem from the tech tools that we offer and the sort of access to knowledge banks that we have on different things from how to hire or how to create specific tech stack at your company, for an example. I work a lot on programs that are designed to help Black founders succeed. So mentorship programs, access to capital programs, a lot of different things in that segment because I'm passionate about economic development, particularly that of entrepreneurship in the Black community.
Awesome. Awesome. Wow. That's a lot.
It is.
Um,
It is a lot.
so before we get into that, because I have a few questions based off of what you just explained to me. But before we get into that, let's learn a little bit about your history. Um, I read in your bio that you are from Arizona. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'm actually originally from Indiana.
Okay.
I grew up in the Midwest, in Fort Wayne, and I moved to Arizona when I was like a, probably 10 or 11 years old. My grandparents were entrepreneurs. My mom was an entrepreneur. My uncle is an entrepreneur. But my mom had a business, a fitness business, and she had an opportunity in Arizona. So we actually relocated from Indiana to Arizona. So I came to the West Coast.
Mhm.
That was quite a long time ago, like obviously over 20 years ago. And I went to high school and college. I went to Arizona State, and got a degree in journalism from the Walter Cronkite School there at ASU,
Nice.
and stayed in Arizona for a couple years as I started my career in technology marketing. And then I moved to San Francisco, which is where I live now, about 6.5 years ago.
Okay. So what what inspired you to get into this business that you're in now?
Yeah, definitely. Oh man, that's a tough question. I'm like, what did I feel like this is one of those questions you get asked and you're kind of like, wow, that's like synthesizing my a large part of my life. But this is how I tell the story because I am a storyteller. That's what I love to do. My first passion is writing. Like my first
Right.
passion is literally taking things that are complex and putting explanation and words around them to create a story from that. And that's what
Awesome.
I love to do fundamentally. And that's what I seek to do in every venture that I take on. And that's kind of like my innate sort of God-given Madison skill. But when I was in college, I had a professor, her name is Leslie Wayne. She's actually a New York Times reporter I think she just celebrated her 39th year at the New York Times. And she really just sort of awoken this interesting interest in me when I was in journalism school about technology. And I remember doing a lot of things when I was in college, like that were focused on writing because I was practicing, practicing on learning how to become a journalist and do that as a job. But I always loved and was super interested in technology since I was a kid, and was always like the nerdy kid that was like playing computer games and getting in trouble because once upon a time when you was on the internet, you couldn't also use the phone, right? And so like my mom was like, you're gonna have to get off the computer games so I could use the phone. And so I was that kid, right?
Wow.
And so when I was in journalism school, she was like, really piqued encouraged me to continue to follow that interest. And so what I realized was that there was a lot of technology companies that were starting to pop up. This was back in the early 2000s, well before kind of like this common understanding, at least in the tech ecosystem, of startups and, this sort of large scale of creation of small companies that are building technologies to kind of change and revolutionize the world. This is like, pre a lot of the things that we deal with today. Like I was on the first ever round of Facebook as a thing. Like I had to use my .edu email address to log into Facebook.
Wow.
Once upon a time, you had to be in college to use Facebook. You couldn't just be anybody. So there was this whole sort of like tech startup industry was very new. And there was a function within that was really interesting to me. And it was like, how do people actually want to use these products? Like, why would anybody want to use Facebook, or why would anybody want to use AIM or Google or Firefox or whatever all the different things are? And I got really interested in using my practice of writing and the skills that I had adopted in journalism school to essentially bring that to the business sector as a function for helping customers understand the benefits that they receive when they use a product or solution or a product or service. Like, what is the solution that they actually benefit from? Not just how the product or service work, but how does it solve a problem that they're looking to solve in their lives? And that requires someone who can think about, synthesize information, and use words to explain that. And ironically, that's really the function of journalism as a practice, right? You're seeing something and you're writing a story about it so that you can educate others on what has happened. And why they should care about it, and why it should be something that they should know about, and why it's important to them. And so that's kind of how I got into the track of working in what we call in the technology industry is kind of product marketing, or content marketing is really what my core specialty is in. And then I got really interested in how can you automate this whole process of like acquiring customers using a narrative that you've developed for a brand. And so then I got into building sort of automation frameworks and the practice of demand generation for business, which is really how do you acquire customers and how do you get those customers to continue to buy your product or service over time. Most of my career I've spent working in content marketing for like SaaS companies or subscription-based service companies. So a lot of that requires understanding how the relationship with the customer evolves over time, and how you can use points in the marketing funnel or sales funnel to continue to foster that conversation and make it stronger, so you can get them to become your customer, but then also sustain it over time as you want them to keep coming back and utilizing your product or service. So that's kind of how I got to where I'm in now, and what's inspired me to continue to do the work that I do in sales and marketing for technology companies.
Wow. So when you're creating, I would say, a marketing plan for a company, if that's for lack of better terms, what do you find is the key point that attracts people to? Is there like a reoccurring theme that attracts people to people's products, like in people's mind? What would you say?
Totally, yeah. So I think that there's a really interesting, I mean, that answer is different for every product or service, but when I think about it fundamentally, for me, I think about the story of a company sort of in two. Let's just use a startup, for example. Like,
Right.
let's use a smaller company. I think of the story of the company in sort of two facets. One is the personal story of the founders and or founders, and how that is involved in the larger sort of arc of the telling the story. And then one is the business story. The business story is, why does this thing, why does this solution, why does this product or service that you're creating solve a problem for the person that you want to use it, right? And being very, very clear on what that is and very creative around how you tell that story is what I think gives companies, especially that are playing in a highly competitive space, advantage. I think the personal story is very important, though, because it becomes the catalyst or the sort of underpinning to the business story. So that's kind of how I think about companies that I feel like, as they sit down and think about, okay, how do I create a marketing plan? First and foremost, your user is this cornerstone of anything that you're thinking about saying in the world externally about your company. Knowing and understanding your user intimately is the first step in the entire process. And then once you do that and you understand what needs that they're looking to meet, you're thinking, how can I talk about my product or service as a solution to meeting those needs? That's my business story. And then how can I use my personal story to underpin that and let my customers know why I'm the one to build this product or solution for them?
Wow. So do you find it difficult to do that for different products, or is it, I mean, can you explain the difficulty of it?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for sure, it's definitely difficult. It's kind of like, so if, for example, if you have a consumer product that you can touch and see and feel, like, iPhone or AirPods or whatever,
Mhm.
it's much easier to think about the process in which it affects like a single human being, right? This is like the B2C marketing model, right? Which is significantly different than the B2B marketing model, or even like the B2B2C marketing model, which I'll talk a little bit about those two different things. But in a B2C model, you're dealing with something that like is impacting a person on an individual level. So I think it's there's a gift and a curse there. It's quite difficult to create marketing plans in that space because it's like you're trying to talk individually, but in an aggregate to all of these different kinds of people, right? Because all different kinds of people use iPhones,
Mhm.
but fundamentally an iPhone is the same.
Right.
Right. So how do you make something that is the same speak differently to so many different types of people? So that's a really hard process to do. But I think it's actually, I enjoy that the most because I think that's where you can get so much more personal and conversational in the way that you use marketing to tell your business story and tell your personal story to help support your business story. I do think when you're thinking about B2B, I think it's significantly harder to create marketing for like a product that you're selling to businesses in a way, because although you want to always find a way to, many times in B2B sales and marketing, you're still targeting a persona within a company or a user within a company.
Mhm.
So you're using sort of B2C marketing methods in those conversations. You still can't like pick up Facebook and hold it.
Right.
Or Facebook's a consumer tool, but you can't pick up like Salesforce and like, as Salesforce is like a business use tool for large companies. You can't pick that up.